Well, hey everybody, it's Sandy and welcome back to my channel dedicated to helping you advocate for your own health one topic at a time. So I've been out of commission for a bit, right? I think this is like the first video in about 2 weeks, and some of you already knew because I put a picture up in the Facebook group what I've been up to. Yeah, and here it is today. So today I've got two different braces on it. There's one, you can see part of this protruding. This is just part of a wrist brace that holds the wrist, and the rest of this is a big brace that holds the thumb. And some of you might be saying, well, how in the world could you have gone from a full cast, including an immobilized huge thumb, to something like this in less than 2 weeks? In fact, it was about 10 days. Well, the answer is that this has been a long journey, still not over. But the segment that's been completed has been completed very quickly, and I want to talk about some of the lessons there. Yeah, so I didn't really go into any detail when I put the picture up on the Facebook group so that people could see the cast. It was just sort of like, hey, I might be out of commission for a little while. Here's why. Talk amongst yourselves. But wow, what a trip this has been the last couple weeks. So I fell hard on an outstretched arm, which is exactly what you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to fall on an outstretched arm. You're supposed to kind of roll, curl up and maybe let your shoulder take the brunt of it. But I don't really have time to plan when something like that happens. So I did the stupid but common thing, which is I fell on an outstretched arm and I fell on hard ground and very hard. And I came down like smack on this side of my wrist. So what I have is a little chip fracture that's off on the pinky side of the wrist that it probably doesn't really even require treatment and might have even been there before, like nobody knows. And I have another break, which is at the distal radius. So there's two bones, long bones in your arms, and the one that goes along the pinky is the ulna, and the one that is on the thumb side is the radius. On the day of the injury, nothing on the radius had shown up yet. So all we knew is that there was a little chip fracture here and the wrist was certainly sprained. And the long and the short of it is nobody goes from a full cast like that to something like this in under 10 days. So this was the result of a more nuanced problem than one would have thought, and it's also the result and a good lesson about second opinions. Yeah, so here's what happened. I took the fall, I kind of hemmed and hawed about it for a couple of hours, had some ice on it, and I decided I was going to go see the hand surgeon. I know most people don't ever see a hand surgeon their entire life because that's so specialized, but it's not uncommon for people like me to already know a hand surgeon. So not only because of working with them, I don't personally work with hand surgeons. I haven't in many, many years. But it's not uncommon for those of us who do the kind of work I do to go to a hand specialist every now and then because, yeah, you have a little thumb arthritis here, you get a little carpal tunnel there, or you get some tennis elbow one year. We just work with our hands and we have a lot of repetitive stress type injuries and things like that. So I happen to have a hand surgeon that I've been going to for just years and years. His office is in a downtown setting in a high-rise building, so you're going in an elevator and it's very much enclosed. So it's not the kind of place where you can say, I'm going to step outside, I'll be in the parking lot. I mean, that requires you to go back down an elevator, whatever. Now, in addition to that, like I said, I hadn't been there in a while. And it looks to me like some things have changed, and not for the better, in my opinion. To my surprise, in the middle of COVID, I guess they have expanded their practice. And my hand surgeon now has 9 providers in the same office where there used to be 2, maybe 3. And they're all there at the same time. The overfill in the very crowded waiting room is spilling all the way down the halls, and the place is mobbed. All I can say is I'm really glad that I came in pretty much my full PPE. I had my DNA, I had my Synovia on top of it, I had eye protection. It was a scary setting. And lo and behold, several of his providers are PAs now. So I'm not going to get in and diss any individual profession. I'm going to touch more on this in a little while. But I do think that some areas don't lend themselves particularly well to expanded scope of lesser trained practitioners. In my opinion, a hand specialty is not really a great place for a PA. Now, nobody jump all over me because this was, of course, one PA. But let me just talk about what hand surgeons do in the way of training. So it's a subspecialty. It's like a specialty of a specialty, where first they train in general surgery, then they train in either orthopedics or plastics. Both of those are entryways into hands if they want to subspecialize. Most of them, in my experience, are orthopedic surgeons, but some are plastic surgeons, and then they further specialize with a fellowship in hands. I kind of just don't see going to a highly subspecialized practitioner in order to see a PA for something like this. So I went in there as scared as I was with this crowd. And when I finally got in, they took a couple of views on the x-ray. They took two views. They took one with my hand flat and one with my hand turned to the side with the thumb up. And I did see the PA pretty quickly, and she took a look at it and she said, "I've got this chip fracture over here on the lateral, on the pinky side. We're going to put this into a splint, and then you're going to come back here in a week and you're going to bring this kind of a splint with you." She showed me the paperwork. It looked like one of those that you use for carpal tunnel. She said, "Bring that with you. That's a removable splint. We'll put you in that starting in a week, and that will be removable to take a shower or whatever, but then you're going to wear that for several weeks. So see you in a week and bring the splint with you." I did kind of think in the back of my mind, well, why are we looking at it again in the week then? Why are we x-raying it again in a week? I happen to know, just because of my background, that there are some small bones, and that if there's a small fracture, it might not show up on an x-ray the same day. And a week later, you might see evidence of healing in that bone. And so then you know that it had been broken in the previous week. But she never said anything about that. And, all she said is, "We're going to use this thing for a week, come back, take an x-ray, and then we're going to put you in the other splint." So I show up in another week. I come on in, same scary place, incredibly crowded. They cut off this splint. They put me in the x-ray, and the same PA comes in and says, "Oh, okay. Oh, good. You brought the splint." And then she starts to look at the computer and she's honing in on these x-rays, and she says, "Oh, but you know what I see now?" And I knew immediately what was happening. And I said, "Is this going in a cast?" And she said, "Yeah, this is going in a cast." I just didn't think something like that should be a surprise, So then I said something I probably shouldn't have said, even though I was right. It really wasn't the best thing for me to say it. I said, "I wish we would have talked about this last week." And of course, that immediately got her defensive, understandably so. And she said, "Well, it doesn't happen very often." I'm sure it doesn't, and I'm sure that's why she told me to bring in the splint, and she had every intention of putting me in that splint. But, I know myself, as a practitioner myself, I know that it's our job to anticipate, not just to do what the situation calls for, but to explain to a patient the course of treatment. Here's the plan. Here's the decision tree. And it is our job to anticipate potential outcomes. Now, I might not go over something that's super remote, like, every time somebody has a routine anesthetic, it does say on the consent somewhere buried in there that even death is possible. But I'm not going to really go out of my way to go down that road with a healthy patient in like an ambulatory setting. But something that we're actually going to look for when somebody comes back, like we're going to take an x-ray in order to look for this, I think warrants a conversation. So, off the top of my head, I think that the conversation the week before shouldn't have been, "We're going to wear this for a week and then put you in a removable splint, bring it with you and see you then." I think it should have been something more like this. "The x-ray right now looks good. We're going to splint it. It looks like you'll be able to get into a removable splint next week. I anticipate that, but we got to take an x-ray in a week and make sure." So sometimes when we take that next x-ray, we see evidence of fracture by healing that wasn't evident the week before. And if we do see that, this thing is going to have to go in a cast. I'm not saying I think that's going to happen, but you have to be prepared for that eventuality. I've been in my business long enough, and frankly, I've just lived long enough to know that that's how most providers would handle that encounter. And it was profoundly upsetting to show up, planning for one thing and then be told that this thing's going to go in a cast for several weeks. And of course, we had our beach vacation coming up, whatever. So the next thing is, I said, "Oh, can I have a waterproof cast?" I've seen pictures of what some might look like. And the one I thought of was something that's completely plastic with giant holes in it. So it like drains. And I was thinking something like that, like a smooth plastic thing that has holes. And she says, "Okay, yeah, we can do that. That'll be $40 extra." I said, "That's fine. You've like lowballed yourself." So she comes in, starts wrapping my arm with like that. It looks like that cotton gauze that you see under a cast. And then she says, "What color cast do you want?" I said, "Blue." So then she gets out the blue stuff, and that's the stuff that dries on the outside. And it's starting to dry, and it's starting to feel kind of icky and scratchy inside. And I said something about it. I said, "Wow, it's tight. It's like clinging to my arm. It feels really scratchy." And she said, "Yeah, the waterproof stuff is, what a lot of people don't understand is that this is just a waterproof lining, that white stuff that she had rolled up and down my arm, was actually not cotton. She explained that it was a very thin plastic that kind of looks like cotton gauze and it rolls like cotton gauze, but actually it's plastic. And she said, besides that, the outer part is just the same as a regular cast. This blue stuff is the same stuff we would have put on you if we'd wrapped your arm with cotton. So all this really means is that if this gets wet, that lining will dry nicely. It's not like cotton, it won't absorb water. And the outside will get soggy. And so if this thing gets wet, you're going to have to hold a hairdryer to it, and it takes about an hour to dry it. So, of course, immediately I thought to myself, well, I'm starting to see a pattern here with the communication. Like, I get it that I asked for a waterproof cast and I didn't say, hey, can you tell me about a waterproof cast? I think I had an erroneous assumption in my head already of what that was. But I kind of felt like that conversation about the difference might have come out of her mouth like before we wrapped up my whole arm, because it turns out that what further came out of her mouth was that, a lot of people really don't like these. Here my arm was wrapped up $40 later, and I felt like the whole encounter was just going so badly that part of me was saying, ask right now to change this out for a regular cast, and I just couldn't bring myself to do that. So I thought, I probably ought to just let this go. We'll see how this is for a few days. In the meantime, as she was wrapping the outer stuff, the blue stuff that hardens up, she had my hand up like this. She told me to put my hand like looking like we're going to arm wrestle, and that's how she had my hand positioned. And she was wrapping it, and once she wrapped it, of course they go in between the index finger and the thumb, and that kind of held the thumb like this. Like if I put some weight here, it kind of held the thumb this way. And she kept saying to me, you got to relax your thumb. And I thought, I am relaxing my thumb. It's just, it's hitting the cast you just put on. But I thought to myself, what am I doing wrong? And she said, if your thumb is stuck out like you're hitchhiking, it's going to be sore. Well, it was kind of already drying that way. So again, I thought, let me just see what happens the next few days. Let's, whatever. I am relaxing my thumb, so it shouldn't be a problem. As a matter of background, I have a severe osteoarthritis in this thumb. It's at the base of the thumb, and that's partly an occupational hazard of what I do. Might be some autoimmune thing. That's not exactly clear yet with my history. That is going to require some surgery, and I've been putting it off. I'm already a candidate, and the arthritis there is pretty far progressed. So, anything where the thumb was going to hurt was a little bit scary. So I came home, walked the floors a little bit, took the picture, put it on the Facebook page, and said, hey guys, I might be out of commission for a while. But I got to thinking, there was a lot wrong. Well, I got a little survey from the physician's office. It was as a text message, and thinking that it was completely anonymous, I talked about the things that bothered me in there in the way of the crowd. I didn't say anything about the care. I hadn't really kind of sorted that all out. But I was very taken by the crowd in the waiting room. It just looked like COVID never even existed. And like there was just not even a nod to precautions for COVID-19. And I got a call from his office from somebody in IT. She asked me to talk a little bit about it, and I told her. And what they told me was that this practice had acquired some kind of a contract or an agreement with the local hospital system's emergency department. And this practice was now essentially the emergency room for any hand injury that comes into the ER in the hospital. Anything that doesn't have to stay in the hospital, like somebody's had an artery severed or something, but any kind of a hand trauma that's got to get turned over gets like splinted in the emergency room and then told to go to his office at 9 o'clock the next morning. It's essentially no different than just going to the emergency room. That really explained a lot in terms of the crowd, and it explained a lot in terms of like why he wanted to take on all these extra providers and particularly PAs, because that's very cheap for him to take on something like a PA, and he can make a lot of money off of that, having all these rooms running. And just doing like the complicated surgery himself is what I think is going on. When she explained to me this new arrangement they have with the emergency room, it started to come clear to me that there was just a fundamental change in their business plan in this setting. And that's why this was a very different office than I used to go to. Later that evening, a very good friend of mine called, and somebody who knew, first of all, he follows my Facebook page, but he's a friend and a colleague, and he knew I was really distressed. And he called and he asked what's going on. I explained the whole thing. Hey, so-and-so? Well, did you know that office changed and is now the ER? And I told him the whole thing, and he was pretty surprised himself because being that we're colleagues and he's in the same town, he knew this person and he knew this practice. And so he said, I'm really good friends with so and so, another hand surgeon in town who I didn't know. I knew of him. And he said, and I've also gone to him as a patient. And if you'd like, I can make a call for you and, see if maybe you want to go see him, maybe get another opinion. And I thought about it overnight and I called him in the morning. I said, yeah, I'd like to take you up on that. And not only that, but I want you to tell him no pressure because not very many people are going to want to take on a case where somebody's already started treatment with somebody else, because what happens there is if you don't have a good outcome, whose fault is it, right? So I could understand if this guy just said, look, I'd love to, but she's already established care with so-and-so. And he did agree to see me, and he saw me the next day. And I went in there with my waterproof cast that was killing me. It had only been on like 48 hours at this point. All I was going to say is, look, if you guys take this off, will you please take this off and just put on a regular cast? But I didn't even have to ask him to take it off. I guess he told his assistant to take it off, take some x-rays, and he wanted to do a full exam himself and then put a new cast on if need be. So we went and did some x-rays. We did a lot more x-rays. We did several different positions, not just those two that I described earlier. And when the assistant went to take the cast off, she actually asked me what's with the thumb because she wasn't sure, it looked very unusual. And I said, yeah, I don't know. I can tell you the thumb's hurting me. What do you mean? And she said, it's set like pretty far away from the rest of your hand. Like usually we close that a little bit. And I said, oh, well, maybe that explains this because the original injury wasn't near my thumb. So although I do have thumb arthritis. So she takes the cast off. We do the x-rays. Doctor comes in the room and he starts examining the entire hand, the wrist, the other hand and its wrist. So both hands. And he starts comparing them. Looks at the x-rays that he took, looks at the report that I brought from the other doctor's office, starts to ask all kinds of questions about the thumb. And then he said, I see what they're calling a fracture. I agree there is a mild fracture. There's some evidence of healing on the distal radius. But given the fact that this doesn't hurt and that doesn't pop, and what does this feel like if I do this, just kind of synthesized all the information together. And, given the fact that these things aren't issues, I don't think there's a lot to gain from a cast. And we've got the added issue of the problems over with the thumb that were pre-existing that we're going to be aggravating with a cast. And the cast might cause other problems. So I'm really inclined to combine two different kinds of splints and see you in a few weeks. This is a really good lesson about two opinions, because what I will say is that generally second opinions don't vary all that much. Generally second opinions sound pretty much like first opinions on things that are straightforward. But this, I think, is one of the issues with something like hands, where I said hands are very intricate. This would be the case with something that's very rare as well. You might find different people doing different things about it. When you hear somebody say, well, there's this, and then there's that, and then I could do this, but it might cause that, and they're kind of synthesizing all different information, that tells you that that practitioner has a really good bird's eye view of like the whole picture, my whole hand, and can synthesize all that information and kind of make a decision about all the various trade-offs. That doesn't mean that's going to be a perfect result, but it means that this person is fully aware of all the different trade-offs they're going to be making and what might be the best course and what might be the least harmful course, as opposed to somebody who can look at an x-ray and say, break, cast, break, cast. I think that that's one of the issues if you have a lesser specialized practitioner, that might be all they're capable of. The more I went through this experience, the more I felt like the place I've gone to for 10 years, which has unfortunately changed so much, the more I just felt that the course they're taking is, what's the most simple so that we can just crank through this volume. And, it's going to be hard to indict somebody for putting a cast on, even if it aggravates another problem, right? Because you brought that problem to the table. And it's probably simplest that if it's somebody who's a minimally trained practitioner, to just tell them to cast something, because that, like, anybody can do. But that's not why I go to a hand surgeon. So in my experience, when you have two different opinions and one is a lot more nuanced and is it openly expresses of all the different trade-offs and is examining, more than just a picture, is, examining both sides. And that's usually the better one. I did worry a little bit because I thought, wow, I hope I'm not buying into this, and really excited about this because this is obviously much more comfortable than a cast. But as time has gone by, it's been several days, like 5 days now, I'm pretty convinced that's not the case. I'm pretty convinced this was the best course because it is getting better. Now, I'm having to be careful with it because this does allow a little more movement than a cast does, obviously, and every now and then I'll catch myself doing something, but that happens less and less. Plus, I've learned to apply this more precisely and get a better fit with it than I could by myself on, the first day. So I feel like I'm getting these two braces, one on top of the other, in place together better. So that's really good. And I have to say, I realized I have so many things to be grateful for. I mean, first of all, it's a very unusual experience for me because we usually know who to go to. And it's an unusual experience for me to be in a setting where I feel really uncomfortable with what's going on. And I think that's why that was an unusual, it was a strange feeling to me. It was a foreign feeling to me. And it took me a little while to kind of parse it all out. More than that, I am so grateful that this other person decided to take me on in the middle of treatment with somebody else. And I am so grateful. I never in my wildest dreams thought I was going to get out of there without a cast. That wasn't even a goal, So I'm really glad he noticed that this would be better off without a cast, because I thought that myself, that with like the arthritis I have, especially in my thumb and, just the base of my wrist, that several weeks in a cast was going to leave me with a lot of stiffness and a lot to work with. And one of the things I'm able to do now, he said I can take this off for short periods of time and I can move it around in water. And that is tremendously helpful, especially with the arthritic components. So I have a lot to be grateful for. And I've had other lessons that are still evolving with this. So I might talk about those in other videos. Like there's somebody that had reached out and helped me just because I think partly this foreign feeling, and it was kind of an emotional time for me anyway that this happened in, aside from, the wrist. This happened during a time that was emotional for me for other reasons. And that led to a little bit of emotional digging and a little bit of self-discovery. And somebody reached out and helped me with that, which I'm so grateful for that as well. I mean, I just, honestly, I couldn't be more grateful. I've started this YouTube channel as a public service, and I found that it's paid off for me in so many ways. And this was maybe an example of that. People reached out and helped me, and I gained a lot of help on a much broader level than like just my wrist. And I never would have had that had I not been doing this YouTube channel all along. So I might talk about that more soon, because that's kind of still developing. That's what I have to say so far about this journey. I've got a lot more to share, but that's maybe for another time. So let me know how you liked it. And until next time, be well. Bye-bye.